So the Tanya for Thursday, the 25th day of Shvat, having previously shown how the belief in God's oneness is at the center of all observance of Torah and mitzvahs, and that the desire to retain the bond, the desire to retain that bond lies at the essence of one's soul. So we saw too far two things. Number one, belief in God's oneness is at the center of all observance of Torah and mitzvahs. And number two, that bond lies at the essence of one's soul. One is indeed in full control and has the power to overcome the foolishness of the evil inclination and be victorious over it, serving God with love and awe. Indeed, it is near to you. It's near to you. In today's lesson, it is within every person's. It is within every person's power to arouse at any moment his, her love and fear of God, and to control the evil inclination. Perik Chafei, chapter 25. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe concludes the discussion began in chapter 18. There he began to explain the verse, "For this is very near to you, so in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it," meaning that to serve God out of a feeling of love and awe for Him is a very easy matter for everyone. Everyone can do it. This assertion seems contrary to our experience, for it is no easy matter, as the Alter Rebbe pointed out in chapter 17. In turn, one's heart from worldly matters to a love and fear of God is not so simple. In answer, he stated that it is indeed an easy matter, for we need not create these feelings, we already have them. All that is required of us is to arouse our inner love and fear of God from their latent state and to employ them in the service of God. All we have to do is to arouse. There's nothing new that we need to create. He then went to explain in chapter 18 and 19 the nature and essence of this love and fear. The soul, with its power of faith in God, by which it is attached to Him, intrinsically desires to cleave to its divine source. This desire also contains an element of fear, the fear of anything that constitutes separation from God. So powerful are these feelings that by his very nature a Jew will sacrifice his life rather than practice idolatry, which is a repudiation of God's unity. In the following chapters, the Alter Rebbe explains that all the mitzvahs are an affirmation of God's unity, which means that everything exists within God and is one with Him. For in the mitzvahs, God's will is revealed, and he who performs them becomes perfectly united with Him. Conversely, all sin constitutes idolatry. For idolatry implies that there is anything that exists outside of God and separate from Him. Through any transgression, one separates himself from God. Through any transgression, one separates himself from God's will as expressed in the commandments, and thus from God Himself, placing himself in the domain of the klippos who deny God's unity. By his very nature, then a Jew would always observe the mitzvahs and would never sin. Were it not for a spirit of folly that obscures his innate hidden love for God and does not permit him to feel the diverse effects of the mitzvahs and sins on his connections with God. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe concludes the discussion starting that every Jew at any time is able to dispel the spirit of folly and to arouse his hidden love for God. When he is tempted to sin, he will actually feel how the sin will tear him away from God, and he will therefore resist the impulse. Similarly, when he is requested to perform a mitzvah, he will feel his love for God dictating that he do so as to be united with him. And this is the meaning of the verse, for this thing is very near to you. To observe the Torah and its commandment out of love and fear of God is very near to us. At any time and moment, a person is capable and free to rid himself of the spirit of folly, which renders him insensitive to the separation between himself and God caused by sin, and the forgetfulness that he has a love of God by virtue of which he desires to unite with him through the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. He is always able to remember and arouse his love of the one God that is certainly undoubtedly latent in his heart, since everyone, even the most hardened sinner, is endowed with this inborn love. Or endowed?
Yeah.
Is endowed with this inborn love. This is the meaning of in your heart, that everyone can serve God out of love, which is an emotion of the heart. Yet, love of God by itself is insufficient. One needs also a fear of God to guard against violating the prohibitive commandments. Therefore, the Alter Rebbe continues, ונכלל בו גם דחילו. דהיינו שלא ליפורת בשום אופן מייחוד ואחדות יסבורך אפילו במסירת נפש ממש. This love carries with it also fear. That is, the dread of being separated on any account from God's unity and oneness, even if it means sacrificing his life. So as not to be separated from him, he will do so, without any reason or logic, but purely out of one's divine nature. Surely then, it is far easier to subdue one's appetite, since this entails much lighter suffering than death, which he would willingly endure, so as not to be torn away from God. Mastering his evil inclination is easier. So Alter Rebbe in a way gives us a tool how to handle the evil inclination by telling us, if God forbid somebody would put a gun to your head and say bow to an idol, you would say go ahead, shoot. So how much more so, how much easier and less of a sacrifice is to tell the evil inclination, go blow, I'm not doing it. I don't want to sever my relationship with God. It's in the same account. If someone would understand that he is being separated from God, same way, by sinning or by bowing to an idol, he would never do it. So all we have to do is to, at a time of challenge, a time of obstacles, we have to remind ourselves what is the effect of the sin, and that we have these capabilities. So somebody would put a gun to my head, I would tell him, go ahead, shoot. I'm not bowing to an idol. I'm not doing an idolatry. So how much more so that I can do easier sacrifice, not to eat something not kosher, and not to speak Lashon Hara, or whatever it is that you have a challenge with. It gives you the tool to fight. So what Hasidus is doing is giving you tools to intellectually fight with the evil inclination. Not just emotionally, but also intellectually, giving you the arguments, true, real arguments that you can handle the Yetzer Hara. Both in the category of turning away from evil and the category of doing good, refraining from sin and observing the positive commandments respectively. To be specific, even when it concerns a minor rabbinic prohibition, one can easily master his evil inclination so as not to transgress God's will, since at the time that he does the forbidden act, he thereby becomes separated from God's unity just as much as through actual idolatry, as explained in the previous chapter. It follows, therefore, that he ought to display the same strength in resisting the temptation for such a sin as he would display even to the point of sacrificing his life in rejecting idolatry, since this sin too separates him from God. Now, there would appear to be a difference, however, between idolatry and the minor sin with which we are dealing. With idolatry, the sinner remains separated from God even after the idolatrous act, as explained in the previous chapter, meaning there is a long-lasting effect. If someone serves idols, becomes separated from God for who knows how long, maybe for eternity. Now, whereas with a minor sin, the separation lasts only as long as the sinful act itself. At the time of sinning, that's a time of separation. That's why people come to make the mistake. People would make a mistake and say, the minor sin I can do because it's a small, and maybe there's no separation. And with idolatry, since it involves the separation from God, I wouldn't do it. I'll be willing to sacrifice my life. So he said it's true. In a way it's true, because when it comes to idolatry, it's an everlasting separation. But when it comes to a minor sin, it's only a separation at the time of sinning.
Yeah, but with idolatry, it can take on so many different forms. So, it's very tough, like, the way people think. I mean, a lot of times...
he said, listen to this, he says, now, even with regard to idolatry, he can repent afterwards. So what's the difference between idolatry and something else, and any other sin? You sin, you're separated from God, and then you're doing tshuva. No, I'm saying, we're talking about idolatry as someone puts a gun to someone's head and said, recognize other God, or say that you don't have a connection. It's like with the Baal Shem Tov, he says that one time the other side, whether it was the Satan or whoever, comes to him dressed like a pious Jew with long beard and said to him, say that you have no share with the gods of Israel, or something like this.
Right.
So the Baal Shem Tov said he spoke the Kopar Leoven and he dissipated. He said a pasuk that all the evildoers should vanish, should be eradicated, and he disappeared. So he recognized that he was from the forces of Klippa by the way he spoke, meaning he looked a certain way, but the way he spoke and asked him to say certain things, he understood that he was connected to the other side. But he says when it comes to Avodah Zarah, even with regard to idolatry, he can repent afterwards and thus assure himself of the unity with God after the idol worship. Nevertheless, a Jew would give up his life rather than exercise this option. And God willing, we'll continue tomorrow, to continue this discussion tomorrow.